Chapter 1.9 is going to be exponents, parentheses, and order of operations. So we'll start with exponential notation. So if you remember back to a section or two ago, we said multiplication of numbers can be thought of as repeated addition. Exponential notation can be thought of as repeated multiplication. So here's the notation. So we have b to the n. The b is called the base, so hence b for base. This superscript n is the exponent, or the power, and the n tells us how many times together we are multiplying the base b. So b to the n equals b times b times b times b, n number of times, so there are n factors of b. And we read this as b to the nth power, and an important note here is anything to the 0 power equals 1, and anything to the first power equals itself. So let's see some examples here. So first example, let's say we had 7 to the 0, 7 to the power of 0. So that equals 1 based on what we just said. And let's say we had 8 to the first power. That's going to equal 8. And let's say we had 5 to the second power. So that's going to equal 5 times 5. So 5 multiplied together 2 times, which is 25. So if we have a power of 2, that's one of the most commonly used ones. So that can be read as squared. So we can read that as 5 squared. And let's say we had 4 to the third. That's 4 multiplied 3 times, which is 64. If we have an exponent of 3, we can read that as cubed. So that would be 4 cubed is 64. And do 2 more here. So let's say we had 3 to the fourth. So that would be 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. 3 multiplied 4 times. That's going to give us 81. And for the last one, change it up a little bit. Let's say we have negative 2 to the fifth. So this is going to be negative 2 being multiplied together 5 times. So negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. This is actually going to give us a negative 32. We have the first 2 negatives will make it positive. The second 2 will also still make it positive, and then we'll have 1 left over, 1 negative left over, making the whole thing negative. Okay. So for the next page here, kind of brings us into this next thing. A negative number raised up to an odd power will give us a negative answer. A negative number to an even power will give us a positive number. And these other 2 important concepts for these properties, which we'll see in these examples, is if we have negative x squared, where the negative x is in parentheses, that's equal to negative x times negative x. Negatives cancel, we get that's equal to positive x squared. Notice that that is different from the one below it. Negative and then x squared with no parentheses, that's going to be negative and then x times x, which is negative and then the x squared. So it's different, parentheses 100% matter. So let's see some examples here. So for the first one, we have just 5 squared. So that's just equal to 5 times 5. So hopefully we can do a bunch of these in our head. That's just equal to 25. 3 to the fourth, I think I did this one on the other page. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 gives us 81. So now let's see it get a little bit harder with these negatives. So we have negative 9 squared. So we have an even exponent. So we know the negative to an even exponent is going to be positive. So if you weren't sure about that, you would just multiply negative 9 2 times. Negatives cancel, we get 81. Okay, next one we have negative to an odd power. So we know it's going to be negative because the exponent is odd. But if you didn't recognize that, then you just multiply it together and see what happens. So negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. Two of the negatives group up, make a positive. We're left with one extra negative, so negative 64. So when they're even, when it's an even power, the negatives will always group up in groups of 2 because that's what it means to be even. And they'll always be positive. If it's an odd power, there'll always be one negative left over, making the whole thing negative. So let's see this as a fraction. So 2/3 squared. So this is going to be 2/3 times 2/3, which is just going to be 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, so 4/9, which we'll see in a little bit that this is actually equal to 2/3 all squared is equal to 2 squared over 3 squared, so still 4/9. So next one, 1 to the 6th. So 1 being multiplied together 6 times, you definitely don't have to write this out. Hopefully you just can see what the answer is going to be. This is just going to equal 1. So 1 raised up to anything will equal 1. Alright, so negative 7 squared. So this time there's no parentheses around the negative 7. So what this is saying is this is negative and then 7 squared. So this is like saying negative 1 times 7 squared. 7 squared is 49, so this is negative 49. And then for negative 4 squared, this is negative and then 4 squared. 4 squared is 16, so this is negative 16. So you can see the difference that the parentheses makes around it. Okay, so next for order of operations here. So it matters, the way that we evaluate expressions matters, and we need to follow these orders of operations. So we have to evaluate what's inside parentheses first. Next, we have to evaluate exponents. Then we have to evaluate multiplication or division from left to right, whichever one comes first from left to right. And then addition or subtraction from left to right, once again, whichever one comes first. So the way that we can remember this is the first letter of each word, which gives us PEMDAS. And just remember that multiplication isn't before division, but they're whichever one comes first, left to right. Same thing, addition and subtraction. Addition's not before subtraction. It's whichever comes first from left to right. Okay, so let's do these examples. So simplify all these expressions here. So 4 plus 5 times 6. So multiplication first before addition. So it's going to be 4 plus 5 times 6, 4 plus 30. And then 4 plus the 30 is 34. So if you added first, you would have gotten 4 plus 5 is 9 times the 6 is 54. That would have been incorrect. Next one, 9 times 6 plus 11. So this is going to be, we have parentheses, so we have to do that first. So 6 plus 11 is 17. And then 17 times the 9 is going to be 153. Next one, 6 times 8 plus 5 times 2. So we have multiplication and addition. So we do the multiplication first. 6 times 8, we get 48. Plus 5 times 2 is 10. So 48 plus 10, we get 58. Next one, 7 times 3 minus 2 times 5 plus 6. So we have parentheses, so I'm going to ignore everything else until we do the parentheses. So 5 plus 6 is 11. So we have two multiplications here, separated by a subtraction sign. So I'm just going to do them both. So 7 times 3 is 21, minus 2 times 11 is 22, and 21 minus 22 is negative 1. Next one, 9 minus 2 cubed plus 5. So we have an exponent here. We have to do that first. 2 cubed is 8. 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So 9 minus 8 plus the 5. So now we have addition and subtraction, so we just have to do whichever comes first, left to right. So 9 minus 8 is first, which is 1. So 1 plus 5, which is 6. Okay, and if we did addition first there, 8 plus 5, we would have gotten the wrong answer. Let's make them a little bit harder here. So 8 squared minus 16 divided by 2 squared times 4 minus 3. So 8 squared, so we have to do the exponents. So 8 squared is 64, 8 times 8, minus 16. 2 squared is equal to 4. So now we just have multiplication, division, and subtraction left. So we have to do multiplication or division, whichever comes first, left to right. So that's going to be the 16 divided by 4, which is 4. So the 16 divided by 4 became the 4. Now we have to do that last multiplication. 4 times 4, we get 16. And now we're just going to, we have subtraction only left, so we're just going to subtract left to right. So 64 minus the 16 is going to give us 48. Minus 3, 48 minus 3 is 45. Okay, next one. 8 minus 3, and then we have brackets here. So brackets are the same as parentheses. We just use them when we have parentheses within parentheses, so we don't get confused, so we can match up which one belongs to its corresponding other parenthesis, so we don't get confused. So I'm gonna do this bracket first. I'm gonna go inside this bracket. So it's gonna be 8 minus 3, and let's see what's inside here. So we actually have to distribute that negative 2 into that first. Oh, just kidding. We have to subtract inside this other set of parentheses. This one. 2 minus 5, so let's simplify that. So negative 2 times 2 minus 5 is negative 3. And then let's simplify inside this other parenthesis also. 8 minus 6 is 2. Okay, so now let's simplify inside that bracket. So we have negative 2 times negative 3 is 6, minus 4 times 2 is 8. So there was only multiplication and subtraction in there, so we had to do the multiplication first. So now this bracket is just a parenthesis, so we have to simplify 6 minus 8, which is negative 2. Then we get multiplication next. We get negative 3 times negative 6. So we kind of have two different ways we can think of this. I'll leave the subtraction sign. So 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. 8 minus negative 6 is 8 plus 6, which is 14. So you could have done it the other way and did negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6 and just made it 8 plus 6 from there, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and I believe this is the last one for this type of question. So 10 divided by 2 plus 3 times 4 divided by 12 minus 3 times 2 all squared. So for that numerator, I'm going to work with the numerator and denominator separately. So we have division and multiplication. So 10 divided by 2 is 5, plus 3 times 4 is 12. And then in the denominator, we have to simplify the parentheses first. Inside the parentheses, we have subtraction and multiplication. So we have to do the multiplication first. 3 times 2 is 6. So the numerator becomes 5 plus 12, 17. Denominator, parentheses, 12 minus 6 is 6. So I dropped the parentheses around that 6 in the denominator because it was positive. If it was negative, you would need the parentheses around it still. So this is going to give us 17 over 6 squared, which is 36. So 17 over 36. And it cannot be simplified, so you can just leave it just like that. Okay, so for the last thing here, or one of the last things, evaluating algebraic expressions. So we're pretty much going to be doing the same thing with one step added in the beginning. So we're going to be finding the value of an expression that has a variable in it, and we're going to be told what value of the variable we want to substitute in for it. And to do this, we just substitute in the variable, in for the variable, and then we just use the proper order of operations. So some examples here, let's evaluate. So the first one, we're going to evaluate 3x minus 2 for x equals 2. So all we have to do is plug a 2 into x. So 3x minus 2 becomes 3 times 2 minus 2, which is 6 minus 2 following the proper order of operations, which is 4. Next, we have y squared. We're going to evaluate that for y equals negative 3. So we're plugging in a negative 3, so that needs parentheses around it. So negative 3 all squared, because the whole entire y is being squared. So negative 3 squared is negative 3 times negative 3, which is a positive 9. Okay, and for the next one, we have negative and then x squared. So we have to be a little bit careful here. It's going to be negative and then negative 2 squared. So we have to do the exponent first. So that's negative 2 squared. That's going to be negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4. But there's still that negative out front, so this whole thing is negative 4. And next one here, so negative y all squared. So we have to plug in y equals negative 8. So that's going to be negative y, so negative 8 squared. So we need to simplify what's inside that big parenthesis, the main parenthesis first. Negative 8 is just positive 8. So this is going to be positive 8 squared. So we really don't need those parentheses around it now if you don't want to, because it's already positive, which is equal to 64. 8 times 8, 64. You'll make them a little bit more complicated for this last page here. I think it's last page. We have x plus 5 to the 5th for x equals negative 7. So plugging in a negative 7 into x, we get negative 7 plus 5 to the 5th. Simplify what's inside the parentheses first. Negative 7 plus 5 is negative 2. Negative 2 to the 5th. So remember, that's an odd exponent. We know our answer is going to be negative. 2 to the 5th is 32, so this equals negative 32. Next one, y plus 4 squared minus 3 for y equals negative 5. So plugging in that negative 5, we get negative 5 plus 4 squared minus 3. Simplify inside the parentheses, that's negative 1 squared minus 3. Negative 1 squared is negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1. So we get 1 minus 3, which is negative 2. Next one, I think these are the last two here. We have x minus 4 cubed for x equals 6. So 6 minus 4 cubed, which is 2 cubed. Once again, we can drop those parentheses if we want because it's positive. The base is positive. So 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And do one more here. So we have 6 times 23 minus x all squared minus 2. We're going to plug in x equals 13. So 6 times 23 minus 13 squared minus 2. 23 minus 13 is 10. So 6 times 10 squared minus 2. So order of operations, we have to do the exponent first. 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. So 6 times 100 minus 2. Multiplication is next. 6 times 100, 600 minus 2 is 598. Okay, and that is it for chapter 1.9.